In this lesson, we're going to talk about how will you control quality. We're going to talk about the importance of meeting the owner, doing QC by yourself, and hiring a third-party QC company. One of my personal beliefs is that the best way to gauge if a factory is good at quality control is to meet the owner and spend time with the owner. Because when it comes to QC, it's all about integrity. And the owner is the person that you will rely on to solve quality control issues. And if the factory owner has integrity, then they'll do the right thing. They'll either fix it or they'll compensate you somehow. So you want to spend time with the owner to get to know them well. Because if you're good at reading people, you'll be able to detect what kind of person the owner is. And what you want is a factory owner that has integrity. And there's two questions you can ask. For example, if you go out for lunch or if you just meet them in their office or walking around the factory, let's say that most likely you won't meet the owner of the factory. You'll meet the salesperson or the merchandiser, so middle management staff. And so you want to ask that middle management staff is, can I meet the owner? I want to do business with you, but I would like to meet the owner of the factory or the business. And if the owner is available, that's a great sign. If the staff gets on the phone and calls the owner right away and says, hey, are you available to come down to the factory floor now or meet the customer at the reception of their hotel this evening or go out for lunch tomorrow? And the factory owner immediately confirms, that's a very good sign. But if they, for whatever reason, they don't arrange for the meeting because the owner is either out on the golf course or out investigating other investments, doing other business projects, that's not a good sign. The second question that you can ask is when you actually do get to meet the owner is ask him a sensitive, difficult question, but don't be shy. Say, what have you done in the past when you've had third-party QC inspections fail? And listen to how they answer. If they answer confidently and give you a detailed answer and tell you stories about the things that have happened and how they resolved those issues, that's a good sign. But if they dodge the question or they give you nonsensical answers, that's not a good sign. So if you decide to do quality control yourself, one of the first things you want to do is prepare your QC checklist like we talked about in the previous lesson. And you want to print them out. So for example, if you know that you're going to have to check 200 units, then print out 200 QC checklist. And that's 200 pieces of paper. Well, if you're smart, maybe you break the QC checklist into 4 parts. So you have 1 page with 4 quadrants. That way you save on paper and it's just less things to carry around. Like one of the things you wouldn't anticipate is a lot of the factories are hot and they have fans and the fans are blowing air around. So you get to the factory, pull out of your bag this stack of paper and then the paper starts flying all over the place. And quality control can be very stressful. So plan on spending long hours in hot factories, standing up. So make sure you wear comfortable clothes, comfortable shoes, and just have a system in place to just repetitively go through like 200 units. And for each unit, you're going to be taking pictures. You're going to be making notes. It's a lot harder than I imagined the first time I did it. And another tip is if you're going to do it yourself, bring somebody with you. It's much more fun doing QC together with somebody else. And if you do start to have problems, you're going to have to stop your checks and go talk to the owners and have the conversation about, hey, why did this happen? I think this is out of spec. Do you think this is out of spec? And then you measure, you have to be diplomatic. You have to kind of make your case and then you listen to their counter argument. And in that moment, you have to make a decision. Do I pass or do I reject this particular unit that I'm inspecting? And then you have to document it and then you put it aside as a defective unit. And then you continue on with the inspection. And you might inspect 5 more and they're perfectly fine. And then all of a sudden you get another one which is defective. And if you're lucky, it'll be the same defect as the first defect you saw earlier. So now you're seeing a pattern. So you document it, you take pictures, you show it to the owner, you put it aside, and you carry on. But when it really starts to get hairy is when you find some other defect that's different, and you have to go through the same process again. You have to have that conversation, make a decision, and put it aside, document it, etc. And now the further you go into the inspection, your confidence is lowering, you're becoming more scrutinizing, and you're looking for the two defects you already found, and you might find more or find others. So if you have somebody else with you, that person can just continue checking, because you've got to get through all 200 and you've only got, 8-hour day. And before you even get there, as I said, have all your quality control checklists prepared in advance and kind of anticipate what are the defects that you think you might have, and what will you do if those defects start popping up. If you do the quality control yourself, you need to be aware of critical defects, major defects, and minor defects. So critical defects means that unit, that product is absolutely not sellable. It's an automatic fail for the whole shipment. Major defects means that it's sellable, but the defect is so obvious that the consumer, your customer, will detect the defect and it will hurt your brand reputation. Then minor defects is that the product is sellable, but the defect is not noticeable. So your customers, they probably won't notice. So you want to decide what is your definition of critical, major, and minor. The AQL system that we talked about earlier, and I asked you to watch that video, the whole AQL system is based on how many critical defects are allowable, which is 0, and how many major defects are allowable, and that depends on your total sample rate and the AQL level that you choose, and how many minor defects are acceptable. And the idea is that if you go over the limits set out by the AQL system for any of the critical, major, minor defects, the whole shipment fails. And that's huge problem for you and the factory. So here's some examples of major defects. For example, if the measurements are out of spec, which means that the fit will be off. The size labels are wrong. So if it's a medium shirt, but it's marked, the label is extra large, that's a major defect. That's really bad. It's still sellable, but it will confuse the customers. A loose button, a loose button. Maybe the when they put it on the first time, they may not notice it right away, but you caught it during the inspection, and it's crystal clear that after 2 or 3 times of opening and closing the button, that the button will fall off, and that's not good for the brand, and that would be like a major defect. Or like on a backpack, if the puller is metal and it's powder coated or painted, and there's chips or there's bubbling and the paint's starting to come off, that would be like a major defect. It's bad for the brand. Still sellable, but bad for the brand. Then minor defects would be like loose threads. Okay, not a big deal. Customer will see it, but the customer will just get rid of that loose thread, or it'll come off by itself. Maybe the poly bag is the wrong size. Maybe it's 1 centimeter too long. Okay, that's not a deal killer. The customers won't notice, and it's not going to affect your brand. Or if the care label, let's say the information on the care label is correct, but let's say the care label position on the inside of the seam is off by 1 centimeter, according to the tech pack. It's not a deal killer. The customers aren't going to notice. It's not going to affect your brand. So obviously, minor defects have a much higher acceptable limit, major defects less, and then critical defects are 0. So like, what are critical defects? Things like holes in the fabric, absolutely not acceptable. Broken zippers, if the zippers don't work, not acceptable. And if there's color bleeding, so color bleeding is not something you usually do during like an inline inspection or a third-party inspection. You'll send the garment or the fabric out to have it tested. Usually the fabric is tested before it's even cut for color bleeding. But it is something that if you want to, you can dip the fabric in a cup of water and see if the dye bleeds, if you have any suspicion that there might be some color bleeding issues. Or like, you get there at the beginning, the QC inspection day, and the factory has a wash machine, you can bring along a white t-shirt, and then the very first sample that you take out, you take it out of the poly bag and you ask them to put it in the wash machine with your white t-shirt, and you set the temperatures, maybe add a little detergent, and then do a full cycle wash, and then check to see if there's any color bleeding from the product to the white t-shirt. So there's a lot of things, just common sense things that you can do to catch any problems. Because once the QC inspection is done and you approve the shipment and you make your final payment and the goods get shipped and they get into the customer's hands, if there's any problems that come up, it's too late and it will affect your brand. So take QC very seriously and understand that it's a full-time profession and there's a lot of tricks of the trade. If you do it yourself, it will be a very long and stressful day. And sometimes you have to, QC takes 2 or 3 days, which is another reason to ask people to come, either pay people or have other staff on your company come and work together. So if you do hire a third-party QC company, which is highly recommended, number one, contact them way in advance because there's a lot of paperwork that you have to do with the QC company to get signed up into their system. They're going to have a lot of questions for you. They have a lot of options for you to choose. Plus, they need time to book the inspections, and they book inspections 1, 2, 3 months in advance. So don't wait till the last minute to hire a third-party QC company. And plan on paying between $200 to $300 per man day. And also remember this, that, for example, if you're talking about apparel or like a backpack, a good quality control person working diligently takes like 3 minutes to do a proper QC check and record what they find. Take pictures and record. So if you do the math and you assume that they only work 7 hours a day, that's like 130 garments, 130 backpacks or toiletry bags or whatever. And this is where AQL comes into play. Because like, let's say if you have 1,000 units and you're doing AQL level 2.5, the AQL system will tell you exactly how many you need to inspect in order to get statistically dependable results. And if the AQL system tells you need to inspect 130 garments, and you know that you can inspect 130 in 1 day, well, then you only need one QC person to work 1 man day. But let's say the AQL system tells you have to inspect 260. Well, that means you need 2 QC people to work 1 day to inspect 260 units. And that's assuming that there's no problems, that everything goes smoothly and there's no like stoppage in the quality control process. So you'll have to, that's something that the QC company will work with you on. They'll help you figure out exactly how many you need to inspect and either how many people you need for 1 day, or if you only hire one person, how many days it will take them to complete the inspection. And the reason why I say they only work for 7 hours, even though you're hiring them for 8 hours, is that they have a lot of paperwork that they have to do at the end of the day. And they take lunch. So if they get there at 8, they work till 5 and they take an hour off for lunch. That's only 7 hours. So realistically, if you have a QC person that puts in the full 7 hours of work in 1 business day, that's like perfection. And usually it's less. Another thing, insider tip, is that sadly, you should hire a checker to check the checker. So me personally, if I'm hiring a third-party QC company, I'm going to be there as well. I want to make sure that the QC company shows up early, make sure that the factory allows the QC person to come in and get set up so they can start work at 8. Don't allow the QC person to go out to lunch with the factory, because the factory will take them out to a nice restaurant that's far away. They'll have a big meal, and they'll take, instead of just eating a light meal in 30 minutes, they'll spend like an hour and a half and have a large meal. What you want that QC person to come back exactly after lunch when the factory starts working again and get back to work right away with, how do you say, high energy and focus, not a stomach full of rice, meat, and potatoes. So it's just human nature. People take the path of least resistance. And if you're not there watching both the factory and the third-party QC that you hired, it won't be the same as if you were there or doing the QC yourself. And another thing is, you can go on to like LinkedIn and just search for freelance quality control in Vietnam. And you'll find people, I've seen it in their title, they say $100 per man day freelance QC person. And I just say buyer beware. The market rate is $250, and in my personal opinion, that's a steal. If you get a trained QC person that has experience, knows how to work with the factories, and has already studied and understands your product well, and has a very good system of documenting everything, and you pay them $250 per day, and they work for you an 8-hour day, not to mention they've got at least 30 minutes to an hour traveling back to and from their hotel, and realistically, they probably spend another hour or two back at their hotel filling out their QC reports. And to get all of that service for $250 is a steal. So just keep that in mind. So in summary, how will you control quality? Well, if you do it yourself, get to know the owner. Just be prepared to go on a steep learning curve and have a very long, tiring, sweaty, hot, frustrating, stressful day. Or hire a third-party control company, hire them early, plan to be there and observe the third-party QC company just to make sure that they do as they promise and that the third-party QC inspection goes well. One last point, another reason to be there is that if the third-party QC company is on the ball, they're doing a great job, and they find a critical mistake or some major mistakes, if you're there, you can see the mistakes yourself and you can make a decision on the spot to say, I know this is not really good, but in the big scheme of things, if we stop now and we don't make the deadline, the amount of money that we will lose by stopping this shipment and going back and fixing these problems will be greater than if we don't meet the deadline and get the products into our e-commerce site or into our warehouse before Valentine's Day or before Black Friday or whatever. So by being there, you can support the third-party QC company to make some very critical go, no-go decisions and work with the factory to figure out what the remediation is going to be on the spot in real time. Okay, in the next lesson, we're going to talk about what Incoterms will you use. See you there.